Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Wednesday, June the 4th in Victoria in the Memorial Arena. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack Show. So we will start off with, my theme for the week is peace and quiet. And peace and quiet are important for humanity. It's important for humanness. Almost by accident, I have spent a little bit of time recently at a few places in town that are very, very quiet. And when you go to them, it's a different world. And I think it's a very important world. We may not want to be there 24 hours a day, but we better not lose touch with it. We can't lose touch with it because that's nature. That's where we come from. That's what we're part of. So, and peace and quiet are an important part of it. And, I don't think they want to allow us to have peace and quiet in the corporate industrial world that they're creating. So, for example, loud motorcycles. And I'm not talking about motorcycles, but I'm talking about loud motorcycles. What you might call noise bullies, and boom cars, some of them are the same. And a lot of people also say very loud buses in their neighborhood, probably tourist buses a bit, and those refrigerated trucks and things like that. I mean, those are complaints that a lot of people have, and just the general level of noise. So I contacted the police here about noise bylaws, and I was told that there is, the level is 91 decibels for, let's say, a motorcycle or a truck, something like that. So why don't the police then do something? That was why I contacted them. Why are these people allowed to just make noise? And so what I was told, I think I understood what I was told, was this. The only way for the police to get a conviction or to make it stand up in court is to ticket somebody, but then they have to test the machine. So they need mobile testers just like they have them for testing alcohol. But I think the legislation, and I think it's provincial, but I think it's provincial legislation. The provincial legislation does not allow the police to do roadside testing. So they can't do the roadside testing. The law is there, but the police are unable to enforce it. And if they just give somebody a ticket, it doesn't stand up in court. So this is this idea of the rules and regulations and the government and our rulers sanctioning the bullies. They always tell us we're against bullying, but really they aren't. They support the bully in many more ways. Fracking in people's neighborhoods, for example, is another one.
Yeah, and I mean, noise is a form of pollution, really. Over a certain level, there's lots of research that shows that causes higher stress levels in people, which then translates into higher rates of illness and discomfort. I mean, it is a public health issue, and there's no excuse for not having the ability to ticket somebody. I mean, sometimes a motorcycle will go roaring by and it lifts people right off their seats. If you're in a restaurant, people just, it's very shocking, and we're kind of used to it. But nevertheless, that does add a lot of stress to our lives, and it's totally unnecessary.
Yeah, so I always wondered why they allowed it, and now I know. Supposedly, I think I'm right, the law does not allow the police to test. So call Christy Clark, call your MLA, call your city politician. This is something we can do, and just tell them to stop sanctioning bad behavior that is, as Walter said, a public health hazard. And just let's tone our city down. I know the corporations, they don't want peace and quiet. It's the last thing they want. And it's up to us to take it, to fight for it and take it. Tiananmen Square, is that where we're going?
Tiananmen Square. Today is the 25th anniversary of the massacre in that square. It's the numbers in China. This occurred in China 25 years ago when there was a huge demonstration. It started out with student protests that escalated into the general population. Hundreds of thousands of people went to Beijing and sat in that square for weeks asking for government reforms,
Asking for democracy, really.
for
That's
democracy,
what they wanted.
and it ended up with a big crackdown, and they rolled through the square with the tanks. And it's hard to know its numbers of many people died, but between 500 and 5,000 from what I've been reading. It's so hard to know exactly, but it was a massacre. What I was trying to find out is get some background on the whole issue of what brought people to that point and everything. And what I stumbled upon was this relationship between how much business boomed in China and in the United States when they shifted a lot of their manufacturing base to China really effectively. After this incident, there's a lot of sort of
So it's almost like the first thing that had to happen is the government of China had
Show
to
us you can
show
crack
that you
down.
will crush democracy,
yeah.
and then we'll do business with you.
But there was a lot of rhetoric, like the Bush administration. This is George Bush
The first,
the second,
second, okay.
and saying, oh, that they had to, there's all these diplomatic problems, and there was talk about sanctions and talk about this and that. But when the rubber hit the road, nothing really happened. They just basically let it settle down after a few months, and it was business as usual. And then they launched straight into this huge, almost it's one of the largest shifts of economic activity in the history of the world, where China became this massive manufacturing base, and the United States went into a steep decline. It destroyed the U.S. society, really.
And none of that had to happen.
No.
I mean, why, if you're the government of the United States, would you make rules
Yeah.
that say, yeah, you can take all of our jobs and move them to other countries around the world where the corporations who own our government here in Canada, the United States, those same corporations can pay them $1 an hour or 50 cents an hour in slave conditions.
Well, it's really a fascist
Yeah.
country. Really, it's very authoritarian. There's really no
Now, are you talking about Canada, the United States, or China?
Canada, the United States, and China. But the thing, China really is the way that they've run the country. It's an incredible country to try to govern. I think it's over 1 billion people in China now. Incredibly volatile situation in China right now. Environmental issues, massive pollution, massive shifts of populations, climate change. We're talking just a real pot is boiling there.
But you know, I have real hope because China has a culture that goes back thousands
Yeah.
of years. And I really hope that they are the ones who, now that they're a very powerful nation, will be able to take this mess that we're in and try to move us in more positive directions. I hope that's what's going to happen.
I'm not optimistic, and I think we're going to see some bad things happening, particularly with because they're so tied in with the West. But the tap is running out over here. Consumers don't have money to buy Chinese products as much as they were hoping for, and they really did destroy our purchasing abilities because we don't have jobs here anymore like we used to.
Yeah, that's like one of the main points of the last 20 years is the loss of jobs in Canada and the United States is not by accident or because
No.
of some rule of nature. This was deliberately done with malice aforethought. They knew exactly what they're doing. They took the manufacturing jobs from North America and sent them overseas. I mean, that's what they did, and they means the corporations who run the country, the politicians who do their bidding, and the media who lies to us about what's going on. They did this to us, but we can take it back. We just
Yeah.
have to start today.
This is huge. I mean, there's a lot of things we could touch on, but I think that's the number one. The take-home lesson today is that what we're seeing in the media. Oh, by the way, they're talking about how in China it's a big clampdown. You can hardly find out about this. The general population hardly even knows about what happened, and this is a Western corporate media pointing at China for not being open in their reporting.
Yeah, I mean,
And you have to really laugh at that,
Yeah.
because they spun that from day one. We never really knew what was happening there through the media. And I think something entirely different than what was portrayed happened there.
well, here's an example of the way the media is used to keep us in the dark. In Seattle, the city of Seattle, the city government of Seattle has just passed some kind of rule or law or bylaw that the minimum wage in Seattle is going to be moving up to $15 an hour. To me, the most amazing thing about that particular story is that there hasn't been a word in the corporate media here. Like this, of course, has been going on for months. The city government just passed the law or bylaw or whatever it is a few days ago. I don't know the details. Some people want the big companies like McDonald's and all the fast food places to have to start paying it almost immediately, let's say within a few months or a year. Other people are fighting to keep, not have it happen for a few years. So I don't know what the details are. But $15 an hour minimum wage passed by the city of Seattle, and the story is that the idea is spreading around the United
Yeah.
States. But not a word in our media, because the last thing they want us to know about or think about is that kind of a thing. And there are so many good things, so many good fights going on in the world. People are getting rid of genetically contaminated foods.
Yeah.
In Germany, they're so far ahead of us in terms of solar energy and just so many things. But the media's job is to hide all of that from us and instead feed us crime, violence, sports, entertainment, nonsense.
Yeah, I think it's the whole destabilization model where if we don't feel secure in our jobs, in our society, we don't feel secure about what's happening overseas, all these different countries that are being stirred up, then it diminishes our ability to have a democracy, because we are basically tied into a war economy in the United States. So ultimately, you can't ignore the fact that half of the U.S. taxes are paid to the war machine, and I think that all comes down to those basic ideas of keeping things destabilized, and economically destabilized is a big part of it. There was another good story, Jack, about a restaurateur who decided to pay his workers a very good wage and not allow tipping.
That's right. That was here on the island.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah.
I should have looked more into that, but it's the same sort of idea where, you go to a restaurant, you sit in a nice restaurant, and you're having a nice meal. Why not pay the staff right up what they're worth and not rely on tipping, which can be manipulated and can be unfair. And then the workers have a living wage, and it's a great idea.
Yeah, so in Seattle, from what I read, a lot of small businesses are quite in favor of this because they think that people are going to have money to spend. And it's not small
Yeah.
businesses that create jobs like we're always told. It's a prosperous society that creates jobs. And
Yeah.
then small businesses can prosper. And they're not prospering now.
No, good point.
Teachers?
Well, we could talk about teachers a little bit. I mean, we were waiting for the announcement at 4 o'clock. The BC Labour Relations Board was discussing whether or not it was legal for the government to dock the teachers' pay 10% because of these rotating strikes, lockout scenarios. Very hard to understand the rationale. It doesn't look legal at all on the face of it, but the announcement hasn't come out, but it will be happening today. But the government looks a little bit desperate right now, Jack. Public opinion really generally is supporting teachers, although there are some, places where you're going to still see some.
I really don't understand, which
Yeah,
I guess I mentioned just about every week, why the BCTF, as one example of a union, but my own union, the
Yeah.
BCGEU, is the same, why they always rely on the corporate media to tell the workers' story. Because the corporate media is owned by the corporations that hate
yeah,
unions. I mean, the way the media talks about unions sometimes is...
Yeah.
But the unions have the financial ability to have their own media.
it's like an unwritten rule that you can't fundamentally challenge the corporate structure. You can only talk about what happens inside of it and unions and all that. But if you stepped outside of that structure and said, well, the corporations got their tax breaks back in the early 2000s, as you pointed out many times, several $1 billion a year ripped right out of the BC economy and stuffed into the pockets of the rich. We wouldn't be having this discussion about teachers had that not happened. I hear commentary every day. We just heard John Horgan on the radio talking about the teacher situation and supporting them, but not talking about the fundamentals of the injustice, only to talk within the scope that they're allowed to, basically, because you can't fundamentally challenge the system, because that
That's
would
right.
be
He
outside
didn't
the script.
challenge. He didn't challenge the
No.
idea that a lot of the biggest unions, HEU, for example, which represents thousands of the lower paid workers in our hospitals, just settled for something that's, I'm sure it's less than the cost of living. So in fact, they're taking another cut. The HEU, all those thousands and thousands
Yeah.
of working people who deserve better, I've just been hammered by this Liberal government, and I haven't really seen the NDP stand up and fight it, or the union for that matter. The union won't even fight it. Neither one will say, hey, Ms. Clark, Christie, your government has taken some $7 billion a year
Yeah.
out of the provincial treasury through tax cuts. Huge amounts of that have gone to the very top and richest people.
Yeah.
So maybe we should look at that, see what people want. Is that what we want? The banks, two of the banks just made $4 billion in profit together. Two banks, $4 billion in profit in the last 3 months. And that's what they report.
That's astonishing.
It is astonishing.
Because where does that money go?
And why isn't that front page news?
Well,
Why isn't that front page news?
it's not in the script, you see. And as long as we're not talking about those fundamentals on a daily basis, we're never going to figure out how to get out of this mess. We're always going to be tied up in the same processes over and over again. And it just goes to show, for instance, that party politics are a disaster in this province, and they're a disaster in Canada, where these parties tend to get away with so much now. Not only the governing party, but all the parties, and it's an attack on democracy, really.
Yeah, so what's happened over the years is that the people we elect simply cannot work for us or care for us because they have to do what the party tells them to do. And the
Yeah.
leadership of the parties is often very corrupt and centered only on what's best for them. So we elect good people in many cases, but if they want to have a career, if they want to keep their job, they have to do what the party leadership tells them or they're out. It's as simple as that. So it's up to us to take a look at our political system and change it so that it starts to work for us instead of for them.
For sure. I mean, you don't need political parties to have a legislature or a parliament. A friend talked to me today and just, pointed out that in British Columbia at one time there weren't political parties, and you'd get elected, you'd head down to the legislature, you'd sit in the legislature for 2 or 3 weeks and hash it out to see if they'd get enough agreement amongst them to form a government, and then they would go to the lieutenant governor and say, okay, look like we have enough people to form a government. That would be a great way to go, because they'd have to go and talk these issues out, find all the compromises that would work to be able to make legislation and then form a government. That's a great way to go.
And we need the ability to have referendums on important issues when either the government is doing what we don't want or
Yeah.
they're not doing what we do want. We've got to have the power to overrule them.
Yeah.
And it's got to be relatively easy. In Switzerland, people can trigger a referendum on virtually any federal legislation that comes through.
Yeah.
But it almost never happens because the government knows the people have the power, so they pass.
they try to make it work. Exactly.
And you're right what you said. It's these fundamental issues that are really the important things. We've
Yeah.
got to stop talking about the symptoms all the time. And
Yeah. Get down to the bottom line of what else is happening. I had a couple other things I thought we'd
Go for
touch
it.
on. I think you actually sent this to me was Desmond Tutu, the Desmond Tutu from South Africa that was a great friend of Nelson Mandela and was involved in that liberation struggle for decades, well respected. He visited Canada and he called the tar sands in Alberta a product of negligence and greed. So that's a well-known worldwide figure, very prominent person saying the tar sands is a huge mistake. I think people should take note when people of this stature are making an effort to communicate to Canadians that they're in trouble with this here type of development. And also, by the way, huge Chinese connection in Alberta, right? Billions of dollars in investment in Alberta in the oil and gas industry. So that's something we should be thinking about, that this is not just a Canadian issue, it's a worldwide issue. And the last thing I had saw, and I don't know if you sent that to me, about the mobile phone subscriptions. Now, there's going to be more cell phone subscriptions in the world than there are people next year. That means, like, how many people are in the global population? Do you know?
7 billion, 8 billion.
So
there's going to be more subscriptions than there are.
Yeah, and about 65% of them are going to be these iPhones, the new high-tech gadgetry, right? But people don't realize that these devices are not green technology. They're massive energy hogs. And from what I read earlier, having a cell phone is equivalent to having a 1,000-watt baseboard heater on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So,
are you listening, awesome?
To support the system, the cell phone itself has a battery and stuff, but the network and the worldwide global network of handling this type of technology is putting a massive stress on generation of electricity globally to keep up with these developments. So,
and plus the toxins that go into building them.
Well, all the other awful things about it. But the point I'd like to make is that this is not green technology. It's very, very damaging to the environment.
So along with our cars, we're going to have to give up our cell phones, or at least really, really, really reduce, but we're out of time.
Be nice and quiet though, Jack.
Yes.
Think how quiet it would be.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Hello, welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Wednesday, June the 11th. I'd like to first thank our volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes it all happen. Our guest in this segment is Will Smith, and Will is the head tech guy for ICTV and usually the director of the program as well. And Will, you're going to start by introducing a clip.
Yes, I'd like to just talk about what a great time I've had over the past, I guess it's been about a year and a half working on this show and being a videographer, learning all the different facets of this form of communication technology. And I'm so grateful to you, and I'm grateful to the staff here at Shaw, because I've just felt so welcomed. And I feel like I'm getting an advanced education on all this stuff, and it's free.
And it's free, yeah. And please don't be grateful to me, because I don't remember doing anything except sort of standing there.
Well, I'm grateful for
yeah,
you
nice
allowing me to help you with the show and put up with my faults and foibles as well as everything else.
Yeah.
But I've just experienced such a shift in consciousness working on this show, and I'd like to show one of my videos that I just finished, just to sort of introduce our talk. So this is a video of a string group that I took a few weeks ago in Langford, and I just want to show you what I've learned how to do, because a year and a half ago I didn't have a clue on how to do this.
Yeah, amazing.
You spend as much time, energy, and money as necessary to make sure your children get the food they need for their bodies. What are they feeding their minds and spirits? not take your young people to some world-class chamber music right here in Victoria? Tickets are free for students and donations are gratefully accepted.
So that video lasts a little bit over 4 minutes, and it took me probably 2 or 3 hours to edit and to make up the story and everything else. And I had no clue about how to do this, and it's really fun. And so I think it's great that, I mean, that's what I want to do with ICTV, with our independent community television Victoria, is keep doing that, keep showing what's so great about living here in Victoria and what great people we all are, and get away from the negativity. I mean, if you look at the stuff on the news, it's like a rerun. You've seen, how many car wrecks have you seen? Is that really that exciting? I mean, to me, a string quartet is much more exciting than a car wreck, and it's new, and it's full of energy, and it's vibrant. So, and
it shows what great talent there is around the city.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that I've learned so much, and that's what's really key to me. Is I've gotten, I don't have a college degree. I just have high school, and so to me, this is a big deal, because I'm starting my third career now in doing this sort of thing, and folding it in with music, learning to be a real musician instead of just someone who fools around with music. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the education system, and what I've learned is, from my own experience, is I think we try to make kids fit into boxes too much, and so I'd just like to talk about that a little bit.
Well, I agree. I think that's the number one problem with our education system, is that instead of saying to all these incredibly talented children, be the best that you can be, instead the education system says this is what you have to be, and if you can't do it, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, so I mean, I tried to go to college a couple of times because my father really wanted me to go, and I mean, I was under the illusion at that point. I went through grade school and high school, and I had a great time in both of those places, because the curriculum was pretty much set, and they taught me lots of great things. But then when I got to college, the first thing, I went to my advisor, and he said, "What do you want to major in?" And I said, "Well, I want to major in physics and English." And he said, he just laughed at me. He said, "You can't do that. It's too far apart." So I left, and I decided, I made a quality decision at some point during that time, that I would rather know how to do something and be able to do it than get a certificate that says I know how to do something, and because it's not the same thing. And that was later in my later life, when I was president of a corporation and hiring people. I noticed that people with the more education they had, the more they expected to be paid just because they know something, not because they could really necessarily do anything for me, but just they had this degree. And so I typically, I mean, even in engineering positions, I had people who had no degrees, because I could just say, I need this problem solved, do it. And they'd figure it out, and I wouldn't tell them how to do it, they just do it. So I think that that's one of the things that we can learn from this, is that kids need to have the freedom to find out what they want. I mean, I remember when I was 12 years old in 8th grade, somebody was trying to convince me to be a dentist. I don't want to be a dentist. That's not what I wanted to do. They didn't say, what would you like to do? They just said, they gave me a test and said, oh, you'd be a good dentist.
Well, if my dentist is watching, I just want to say I love dentists.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't like dentists. No, don't
I'm
get
joking,
me wrong.
I'm joking.
I think dentists are great. It's just that, you know, I mean, or another thing, I went back to college, and because my dad just wanted me to be able to work for him, actually, I started apprenticing with him. And my math teacher, my calculus teacher, made me do all this busy work. I didn't keep my notebook. I got good grades on the tests and good grades on class participation and quizzes, but I didn't do my notebook. And so he said, well, you're going to get a C then, because you have to do your notebook. Well, I had lots of other things, but that really annoyed me, that he wanted me to spend 2 hours just doing busy work. Why can't I do what I want to do? I want to play the piano, or I want to do something, make something electronic, or a computer system or something. I don't want to do busy work. So I left college, and I told my dad, look, let's find somebody that I can get tutored in accounting for. And I put an ad in the paper, and I found a guy. He was a professor at Arizona State University, and he said, I'm so glad I found this ad, because I was going back to teaching a class at ASU, and I'm in a student, I have 200 students who don't want to learn. And I'd much rather teach one person who wants to learn than 200 people who don't. So that was a big lesson to me too. So I just think that kids need to find out what they really like to do and then do it. It's never been a problem for me. I mean, whatever I do, at some point somebody says, hey, I want that, I'll pay that guy to do that for me. He's doing good work.
It would be nice if the system kind of encouraged that whole thing, because that sounds good to me. I think it's more of what we need. And it would be nice if the system kind of moved people along in those ways. I think it would be a better system for all of us and for our society.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show you one other thing. When I was about, I guess about 28, I started an automation company, and I was in North Georgia at the time, and there was a lot of carpet making there. So I found a guy who had a carpet machine, and it would make carpets, and he had this really primitive thing where he had some film and some lights that shone through the film. And so when he wanted to make a carpet, he'd have to here's a carpet we made. I found this at my mom's house she kept this as a memento. But anyway, he'd have to count the stitches, and he'd make these little dots on the film, and then it would make the machine work. And so, can you see that okay?
So you put together the equipment and the computer,
Yeah.
so that the
So
equipment could make
he never said, do you have a college degree? He just said, can you make my machine run on a computer? I said, yeah, sure. So I got an Apple II. I got 2 of them, and I hooked one up to the machine, and then I put one in the office where he was designing these things. And I don't know, it took about 3 months or so, and we made a computer system. And then he had a real company eventually take over that had, many people in it, that they could actually build the stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's no end of stories about people who have made $1 million even though they're, not the sharpest tool in the shed. So it's just a matter of passion, of finding something that you really like and doing it so that you focus on that. And then I just want to fold that into consciousness, because I started, after talking on the last show, I started talking a little bit about magic, how this stuff looks like magic that people are doing when they're doing this this quantum physics type stuff. And so I want to use the same piece of carpet and just show you that if you look at this is kind of like our reality. The carpet design is our reality. And then if you look at the back, you've got, okay, now you count the stitches, and you can see there's a red thread here and a black thread here. So that's more like the information, and you can express that information in a lot of different ways. You can express it as, you could make a code that says blue is B and red is R, and you could write this code, and you could look at the code, and that doesn't look like that carpet, but nevertheless, it's the carpet. So quantum physics is kind of like that. Quantum physics doesn't really have anything to do with reality. If you look at what they're saying in quantum physics, they use terms like strangeness, they're up quarks, down quarks, they've just taken words out of the air that don't mean anything. So really that's a lot like what we're talking about with the information domain, with this stuff that's magic. So I went and I started reading books about magic. And the first book I looked at, one of the books was about Celtic and Norse magic. And it was very interesting. One of the first things was, magic is the ability to change consciousness at will. Now, isn't that an interesting definition? I would never have come up with that for a magic, would you? Of definition?
I still wouldn't come up with it even tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. And then I did some more.
It makes great sense.
I found a book on Huna, and the Huna in Hawaii. So I just want to talk about that kind of we don't have too much time left. But so these Huna are magicians, and that's how their society ran. And then
Are they people who lived
in Hawaii?
Okay.
Now they still live there. Okay. It still exists, but it's illegal, so they don't show it. But when the United States took over Hawaii, they made it illegal. The Christian missionaries came in and they made it all illegal. And so that was hidden. But this guy came in, his name is Max Freedom Long, and he studied them for many years. And he wrote a book, it's called The Secret Science of Miracles, I think. And you can look it up on the internet. I'll put a banner here, and you can either buy it or you can even find an Acrobat version and download it and just read it on your computer. It tells about his study of magic over many decades in Hawaii. And it's very interesting because what he found out was he just sort of gave up. And then he woke up in the middle of the night once, and he had this idea that if he could just locate the symbols or the words that they're using to do this magic, that would be a key. And so he wrote a little pamphlet on the origin, on the words, on the actual words, and he published it. And it took a couple of years, but an English professor from England said, that's really interesting because he was actually a journalist. I'm sorry, I confused him with somebody else. But anyway, he was in the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, and he found a tribe that used those same words. Now, how did that happen? A tribe in North Africa and the
Huna.
Yeah, kahuna, yeah. And the interesting thing, I mean, it started off with, they have kahuna also in their language, but it's spelled with a Q. And then all these other words. And they tell the story, so he went and investigated them, and they tell a story how in a long time ago, they needed to disperse. They needed to send some of their people out. And so they did what we would call remote viewing, which the U.S. government engages in to find out stuff, military intelligence. And they found these islands in the Pacific, and so they sent off a contingent of people to settle these islands, which are the Polynesian Islands and Hawaii. And these linguistic roots are the same. So, I mean, you know, how does this happen? And since I'm from Arizona, I kind of make the connection with Kachina, because the Navajos and the Hopis have Kachinas, and they're magic too. So these are suspicious, you know. So anyway, so if you read this book, it just talks about.
We're not going to be able to read the book.
Okay. Well, anyway, I just would encourage everybody to take a look at this stuff. I know it's woo-woo, but we've got to develop a different way of thinking, and we need to go back to these guys, the shamans and the people who used to know how to do this stuff that we've shut up.
I agree. Will, thank you very much, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Often when we find ourselves in a healthcare crisis, the choices of a practitioner and what type of therapy to choose can be daunting and a bit confusing. And so on the show, we try to present to you the options of which choices of practitioner and what choice of therapist might best suit you in your particular health crisis. Hi, my name is Cameron Moffat. I'm an osteopathic practitioner here in Victoria, and you are watching the show Choices for Your Healthcare. Today we have the pleasure of meeting Jill. Jill Kirby is a certified Body Talk practitioner of 14 years, and she also teaches a one-day seminar called Body Talk Access. So welcome to the show, Jill. Thanks for coming
Thank you very
on.
much for having me. It's
You're welcome.
a pleasure.
So I'm curious, body talk. Do our bodies actually talk?
They do, but a lot of people don't listen.
Okay.
Basically, when your body gives you a symptom, it's talking to you.
True enough, yes.
So, unfortunately, we think the symptom is the problem,
Right.
and it's like the tip of the iceberg. And you've got the symptom up here. If you eradicate the symptom, you're not necessarily addressing what's underneath.
Okay.
And that's what Body Talk does. It addresses the underlying issues that have resulted in those symptoms presenting themselves.
So many therapists claim that. I know as an osteopath, I'm always trying to do the same thing. How
Yes.
does Body Talk do it differently?
Body Talk's a little different. It's based in dynamic systems theory. Our body-mind is a system, a very dynamic system. It's an information field.
Sure.
And what we're doing with Body Talk is using what looks like a form of muscle testing to get answers from the innate wisdom. We all have an innate wisdom in our body that knows how to heal.
Right.
And so when we are doing a Body Talk session, and there's a big chart here that shows all that Body Talk encompasses,
Right.
I'm using that innate wisdom to guide me through the process because I don't know what your body needs.
Right.
So I'm going to ask the body, what does it need? Because for each of us, what's going on for us in terms of our health, our state of health is a reflection of basically everything that's happened in our life.
Mm-hmm.
So I can be taken to something physical. There might be a damage to a particular part of the body, but there may be underlying issues that are emotional that have been held in the tissues there.
Mm-hmm.
And so by releasing that emotional charge, then that enables the healing to go
Okay.
forward.
Now I understand you're going to in a few moments show us a couple techniques, but maybe before that, can you explain how you actually do that? How do you listen to the body? Are you
Well, the client will come in and lie on my massage table very comfortably. A lot of them fall asleep.
sure? Okay.
And they're just going to rest their arm on their chest or on their belly actually. And I use my hand just to lift. And I set up a communication with the body mind. And when the arm feels heavy to me, it's telling me no. When the arm feels light, I'm getting a yes.
Okay.
So I'm asking yes, no questions to navigate through my protocol chart. And
Okay.
just when I get to something, then I find as specific as I need to go.
Okay.
I might be taken to the liver, and it might want me to go as specific as a particular type of cell in the liver,
Okay.
and maybe even beyond that into the cell.
Okay.
And we're balancing that energy with whatever else it needs to be balanced with. We're all, as I say, a dynamic system, and everything within the system needs to communicate with everything else.
Sure.
So when the system is stressed, much like the electrical system in your house, if you plug too many things in, you're going to blow a fuse.
Right.
So that's what happens to our bodies. We get stressed, literally.
Well, especially in this culture, in this day and age, where many of us are very
Absolutely.
stressed.
Yeah, I have clients who come in and say, "Well, I don't have any stress in my life," and I say, "Well, you live in a city, and you know, even if you don't have particular traumatic things going on in your life, you're impacted by the lights around you, the
Microenergies, the cell phones.
everything,
Yes. Yeah.
because our bodies have to deal with that.
Right.
So not only is our body a dynamic system, but it's within a larger system, which is the environment.
Right.
And the chart will, as you see on the chart, there's an area on there that covers environmental factors.
Okay.
So that might be something, your liver might be having trouble with your computer.
So do you find, yeah, all of us have trouble with our computers. So when you find something that is particular as a cause in the environment, once you've treated the person, is it going to come back right away, or can you set it up somehow that the body becomes more resistant to?
Essentially what we're doing is we're balancing them to that factor so that it ceases to have whatever charge it does that's triggering them.
You should be hired by BC Hydro for the smart meters.
I know. Well, those are the kinds of things. Some people are particularly affected by electromagnetic fields.
They
So
are,
those
yes.
kinds of things can come up in a session if that happens to be something that is kind of throwing their system
Okay.
beyond the stress threshold that they can tolerate.
So once you've balanced the person, then they are no longer affected by that existing issue.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, we tend to think in Western medicine that there's a cause that's causing an effect.
Right.
And that's that whole thinking that you just clear the symptom and it's gone away.
Right.
But when you're looking at what we do in Body Talk, you're looking at that stuff below the surface.
Okay.
And so there's seldom one cause
Right.
for something. So you're going to have all these threads that you need to kind of bring together to help diffuse that particular issue,
Okay.
right? And also we're dealing with a lot of complex issues now that are basically the result of some of the medical treatments we've had. The antibiotics and other medications that
Sure.
people take have destroyed a lot of the microbes in the body
Mhm.
that we now know are essential to our health,
Mhm. Yes, they are.
right? We're 90% of our cells are microbes,
Right.
10% are human.
That's right.
So as we try to kill off all those bugs, we are destroying the system that keeps us healthy,
That's right.
right? So
That's very true.
again, we've just learned about that information. I just finished another course in Body Talk that was covering all of that.
Okay.
So that goes on the chart now as part of the body. And
The
we can-
bacteria flora.
We can actually balance the microbiome of the body or different parts of the body or the epithelial cells that help keep the microbes from getting through.
Yeah.
So again, it just adds one more tool to our little toolbox for Body Talk, and we
So when you say you
incorporate
can
it.
balance them, are you dealing with vibrational energy, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We are an energy system. We're
Sure.
we're actually an information system,
Right.
right?
Yes.
So we're taking, when I do Body Talk, I'm getting what we call a formula together, where I'm asking what needs to connect to what, to what, to what.
Mhm.
And once I've got that together, we do some tapping, and that inputs that information into it's kind of like really putting an overlay into your field, right?
Okay.
Of a new way of being, a new information,
Okay.
right? So that your body can then integrate that information.
So is the tapping then changing my own or our own energy, or is it introducing a new energy?
It's actually introducing the information. You know, if you
Okay.
take a piece of paper and you put iron filings on the top of it,
Mhm.
they will take the shape of the magnet underneath.
Sure.
But a few of those filings might not get into place. Well, if you tap the paper, they're going to go into,
Yes, they will.
right?
Okay.
And that's essentially what we're doing. We're tapping
So you're tapping energy centers.
You're tapping
to
the head because this is a computer. We
Yes.
want to input the information here.
Right.
And you're tapping on the heart center because the heart actually circulates not only blood but information as well.
Sure.
And I would like to show you one of our techniques.
Yes, please. Okay.
This is one of the techniques that I teach in the Access class that I teach. It's a one-day course. And this technique helps to balance the whole brain. So it's improving the circulation and communication between the left and right halves of your brain.
Okay.
So in order to do this, and you can follow along,
So the folks at home
and the
could
people at home can follow
follow
along.
along. Okay.
You're going to put your hand on the base of your skull.
Doesn't matter which one.
Doesn't matter which hand.
Okay.
One hand goes on the base of the skull. The other hand is going to tap gently on your head and over your heart. And you're going to breathe deeply while you're doing this.
Okay.
And as you do this, you're just going to focus gently on communication and circulation.
Okay.
That's the awareness that we have. We're bringing that awareness to the body.
Okay.
So the hand position that I'm holding is just basically a focusing tool.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right.
So after I've had 2 breaths on that hand position, I'm going to raise it up to just above that and keep tapping the head and the heart and breathing deeply. And we're just going to continue to do this,
Okay.
covering the whole brain and breathing deeply. And this is a very powerful little technique. If somebody's injured and might go into shock, if you do this technique, they will not go into shock.
Oh, okay.
It keeps the brain awake. And we've actually had cases of people in coma who've come out of coma when they've had their cortices tapped because it's waking up the brain.
Sure, of course.
So you've done all the ones in the center line, and then we've got brains at the side of the head too,
Okay.
temporal lobes. And you've got to cover that and take one hand away to tap. And again, breathing deeply throughout. But as I say, it's just an amazing technique. It's used in conjunction with one of the other techniques, and we call that our fast aid protocol. And I teach that in this one-day course as well. And I'd
Okay.
love to give you one story that I have for myself using that.
Sure.
Um,
Please do.
I was at a class doing some yoga, nothing strenuous. And I happened to be sitting on the floor, and I went to move, and my right knee just would not move, and something had shifted out of position in it because it hurt.
Okay.
I wasn't going to move it.
Right.
So I started doing the fast aid technique, and I did it for probably about 10 minutes, and then I felt something go in my knee, and I got up, helped everybody put stuff away, and walked home,
And
and
it felt fine.
felt fine. I've actually heard of it being used for a dislocated shoulder, and the arm just lifted back into
Rebalance
position.
itself.
So you're basically, yes, you're just giving instruction to the body. Hey, take note here. There's something out of whack,
Right.
and the brain's going, oh yeah, didn't see that. I was in pain and I went offline. So you want to keep the brain online. So you're doing the cortices to keep it awake,
Okay.
keep
All
it focused.
So then who, in your experience, who seeks out body talk? Who does it work the best for?
Wow, who doesn't it?
Sure.
I have worked on people basically from fetal life right till death.
So,
It-
excuse me, when you say fetal life, you mean you've worked in utero?
I have actually.
Okay.
I've just one of my clients just had her baby, and we did do some balancing for the baby while it was still in the womb.
Wow, what a great idea.
It is fantastic because for a lot of us, you know, we talk about emotional holding patterns, and some of the subconscious beliefs and other stuff that we have goes back all the way to fetal life.
Sure.
So that can come up in a session.
Okay.
And when you balance that, it can make a huge difference. I had a client recently, actually, and the belief system that came up was basically, I'm not okay, I'm not good enough. And it traced back to fetal life, and the experience was that her parents actually wanted a boy, she was a girl.
Ah,
And she'd taken that on and developed this belief that, well, there's something inherently wrong here that I can't fix. I'll never be good enough.
right.
Right?
That could really
It impacts every
impact
every
a
part of your
person's
life.
life for many years if they're not
Absolutely.
aware of it.
And this person, you know, my age, in their 60s, and still it's been carrying on all that time.
So then what do you do as a practitioner when somebody has an awareness like this? That must be quite profound for that person.
Oh, absolutely.
How
And
do you deal with that?
well, it's interesting. I mean, sometimes people will have a big emotional release on the table. Oftentimes they don't. We're bringing it to their awareness, but they may not have a big, you know, they might not cry or get upset or
Sure.
anything. Sometimes they do. I had one client who the issue that came up was around sexuality, and I needed her to say it's safe to be sexual.
Right.
And she couldn't say it. She started crying. and it probably took us 20 minutes before she could actually even say those words.
Okay.
So we just kept tapping the whole time, but the profound changes in her life afterwards.
I'm sure.
It's really exciting.
So then after somebody has had this type of awareness, this cathartic awareness, does Body Talk help them go through the subsequent changes in their life?
Well,
continuing the
yeah, I
balance?
mean, assuming they keep coming for sessions, and that's the exciting part with Body Talk is it's lovely when somebody's ache or pain goes away or a symptom disappears, but for so many people it's their attitude to life and their beliefs about life and the struggle that life is.
Mhm.
And with Body Talk, things become easier because you're diffusing some of those beliefs.
Sure.
And, people will think, well, my family changed. And yet their attitude towards their family changed, and
Right.
therefore they're not behaving the same way, therefore their family's not
Right.
reacting the same way, right?
Be the change you want to
Again,
see in the world.
Again, we are part of a system,
Okay.
right?
Right.
And Body Talk can be used on sports teams,
Okay.
any system, right? So on an
okay.
individual person or we've got Body Talk practitioners who've worked with professional athletes who improve their
Sure.
game, as well as, of course, people with all kinds of serious
Right.
illnesses.
So even the corporate world could in
You
fact
can work
bring it
on
in.
corporations, you can work on sports teams, you can work on families,
Right.
on couples. Yeah, the possibilities are kind of endless.
Okay.
And even with just the Access course that I teach, this is 5 of the techniques,
Okay.
and they're all just as simple as the one I just showed you.
Okay.
They're very simple, but the effects can be profound because they can basically cover a lot of things that you might, a lot of people would go to the doctor for.
Sure.
And so, particularly in the States, it saves a lot of people a lot of money
A lot
on
of money.
healthcare.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, and also our healthcare system may not address at the level that this type of therapy is addressing.
Yeah, Access can cover a lot of things, and for a lot of people that might be all they need.
Right.
And if something isn't working out with that, then
Right.
they might want to come for an actual Body Talk session
Sure.
so that we can get at the deeper things.
So how often do you hold these courses?
I teach the Access class about once a month.
Once a month?
I have small classes because I'm teaching in my home,
Okay.
so
Right.
about 6 students, and it's
Okay.
great. We have a lot of fun.
Now, is there typically a person that you have seen, a type of person that's, say, looking at introspection, or is it somebody that's dealing with pain, or who kind of shows up at your courses?
Some people are just curious and want to overall, benefit
Right.
their health.
Okay.
It's empowering. We're so disempowered in terms of how we see health.
Sure.
We think if there's something wrong, I have to go get somebody to fix me.
Right.
And Body Talk isn't fixing anything. Body Talk is really helping restore balance and harmony,
Okay.
whether within yourself or with you and the environment
Perfect.
you're in.
Okay. So how would somebody know if they need some Body Talk? What would be some of the symptoms or the what would draw somebody
Well, anytime you don't feel that life is flowing well,
in? Okay.
anytime you have any kind of symptom or even a diagnosis. I had a client recently who'd over the last couple of years had been diagnosed with her liver was not working well, her kidneys, just basically a huge long list.
Right.
And
Okay.
she's been seeing me for I think 6 months,
Okay.
and the report she got from her last doctor, so she brought it to show me. She was so excited.
That's
Because
wonderful.
everything was working really well, and she
Oh,
was just, the
isn't that
doctor was
beautiful?
like, well, whatever you're doing,
Keep doing
keep
it.
doing it.
Keep doing it.
So, yeah.
Wonderful. Jill, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much.
That's
It's
very
been
interesting, and
wonderful.
hopefully the viewers at home can get a sense that this may be something that is a possibility for them, or
I
an
hope so.
exploration into their deeper understanding.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we're running out of time. I'm getting the signals from our cameraman that we are almost done. I'd like to thank everybody for watching the show. It is our hope here at the Choices Show and Shaw Cable that you find this information useful and helpful. And remember, make these decisions of how you want to proceed with your health when you're not in a personal health care crisis. Make the decisions of how you want to treat your health when you're not in a crisis, and it'll be a much better decision. On behalf of myself, Cameron Moffat, and the crew here at Choices and at Shaw, I'd like to thank you for watching, and we hope you found this interesting. And until next episode, stay healthy. Thank you very much. Bye.